If there's one thing the world has learned since Russia invaded Ukraine, it's that it should never ever count Ukrainians out. They are exceptionally resilient. They will dig in, fight back and beat the odds, as they've proven time and time again. And their latest victory is yet another shocking but true example of that, as Ukrainians' forces recaptured the village of Kindrativka, a place that the Russians thought would be theirs forever. It may not look like much on a map, but Kindrativka is a site of significant strategic importance. It's situated in Ukraine's northeast Sumy region, just a couple of miles away from the Russian border, and that's what makes it a prime target for the Kremlin's forces, as part of President Vladimir Putin's plans to create what he calls a buffer or security zone along the border. Putin has been bringing up this idea for years and spoke of this plan again in March of this year, as Russian forces battled to liberate parts of the Kursk region that Ukraine had managed to capture. At the time, he suggested that a buffer was a necessary measure to protect the region from future attacks. Of course, we need to think about the future and about creating a security zone along the state border. To achieve the same, the Russian military sent an estimated 50,000 troops to the Kursk region. They have since launched a barrage of assaults on nearby Ukrainian towns and villages. The area has seen much back and forth fighting, and while Russia's progress has been slow thanks to Ukrainian resistance, they have made some progress as the weeks and months have passed. Multiple towns and villages were captured, and on June 7, though some Ukrainian microbloggers claimed this happened even earlier on June 2nd, Russian forces entered Kindrativka. Little more than a week later, on June 16, it was confirmed that they had captured the village. That was a big blow for Ukraine, not just because it had lost another village to the Russians, but because the enemy forces were drawing closer to the city of Sumy, the largest city in the region and home to over 200,000 people. Indeed, with the capture of Kindrativka and nearby Alexivka, Russian forces were said to be a mere 12 miles or 20 kilometers from Sumy. That meant they could easily start to target the city with drones and artillery strikes, as reported at the time by the Ukrainian open-source intelligence service Deep State. In this area, Russian forces have managed to get within a 20-kilometer range of Sumy, which could lead to FPV drone strikes on the city once appropriate crews are deployed and if there's no effective counteraction from our side. With drones and artillery shells set to rain down on Sumy, the situation could have rapidly deteriorated. The Russians could have pressed their advantage, marching onward to capture the city and gaining valuable ground and influence across the region. Ukraine couldn't afford to let that happen, so they did what they do best. They fought back. On July 8, reports emerged that Ukraine had launched a counterattack, moving troops back towards Kindrativka in a mission to recapture the village. At first, it seemed impossible. The Russians had not only taken the village, but had fortified their position. Several units were in place to guard the area, including the 40th Motorized Rifle Regiment, the 30th Motorized Rifle Brigade, and the 155th Marine Brigade, according to claims by Christian Bagay on Medium. Russians also had control over nearby settlements to their east, west and the north, effectively allowing them to call in reinforcements or request additional weapons and supplies as needed. But Ukrainians have a habit of making seemingly impossible things happen, thanks to their smart strategy and careful, calculated movements. In the days and weeks leading up to their recapture of Kindrativka, the Ukrainian armed forces launched a flurry of precision strikes on Russian positions in northern Sumy. The goal was simple: disrupt Russia's momentum, preventing them from gaining any more ground and force them to make some sort of mistake, opening up an opportunity for Ukraine to strike even harder. As a result of these strikes, Ukraine was able to first liberate the Sumy town of Andriivka in mid-June. This gave them a crucial advantage, opening the path for a pincer-like strike on Kindrativka. Of course, the Russians didn't go quietly. Eager to regain control, Kremlin commanders ordered a series of counterattacks into the area to retake Andriivka. But the troops rolled right into a bloodbath, as Ukrainian soldiers had fully secured the settlement and were ready and waiting to fire on any Russians that came into range. Satellite images from the area soon revealed the price of Russia's costly mistake, as fields surrounding the village were littered with the remains of fallen troops and the burning frames of blown-up motorcycles. And Ukraine didn't stop there. It kept the pressure up, continuing to bombard key Russian positions, including rear area troop concentrations, local command posts, and logistics hubs. These strikes caused numerous casualties, but perhaps even more importantly, they also pushed the Russian reinforcements back, effectively cutting off the all-important supply lines to Kindrativka. Suddenly, the situation had dramatically changed. The Russian troops in Kindrativka, who had previously been quite safe and secure, with steady supplies of reinforcements, munitions and weapons on demand, were now effectively on their own and at a major risk of a sudden Ukrainian strike. They'd gone from a position of power to one of weakness, and Ukraine's forces knew that their time had finally come. Seizing the opportunity with both hands, they acted quickly and decisively, launching a coordinated array of drone and HIMARS missile strikes against Russian troop concentrations in and around the village. The HIMARS missiles did the bulk of the damage, wiping out munitions stores and blasting Russian fortifications to smithereens. The drones, meanwhile, took to the skies, their operators scanning the scenes for any signs of life, hunting down any remaining Russian troops they could find. Ukraine also conducted airstrikes further back into occupied territory, using AASM hammer bombs to ensure that the Russians were not able to send more reinforcements into the area. They also targeted ruins and remains of buildings that the Russians might have tried to use for cover, essentially exposing them so they were utterly defenseless for the next stage of the attack. From there, with Russian resistance in Kindrativka more or less broken, Ukraine's troops rushed in from two different directions. One group attacked from the south, via a path that had opened up through the liberation of Andriivka. Another circled around and struck from the west. This pincer movement proved highly effective. Ukrainian soldiers swept through houses, basements and buildings, backed up by drone support. They faced minimal resistance and quickly established complete control of the settlement. Kindrativka was theirs once more, and the news was soon reported on major Telegram channels. The Deep State channel, for example, posted a full breakdown of Kindrativka's capture, detailing Russia's losses and hailing the fine work of Ukraine's 225th Special Operations Division. 225th Special Operations Division liberated Kindrativka in the Sumy region. The Katsaps lost 3 battalions and 1 battalion commander. According to information from our sources, the 225th Special Operations Division completed the clearing and consolidation in Kindrativka. This is the second village that the unit has liberated in the Sumy region. During the liberation of both villages, the army suffered heavy losses, namely the 40th Special Operations Division Battalion, the 155th Special Operations Division Battalion, and the 30th Special Operations Division Battalion. By the way, the latter's battalion was also liquidated. The enemy infantry was still surrounded in the village for a long time, so we had to wait for it to be eliminated. First of all, this success was made possible due to the unique tactics and approaches used by the 225th Special Operations Division. Once again, the unit demonstrated that we have those who are capable of conducting high-quality offensive operations. As the post notes, the 225th Division deserves special merit for the success of this mission. In fact, the 225th has arguably played the most impactful role for Ukraine so far in terms of defending the Sumy region and limiting Russian progress. The division formed in March 2022, not long after Russia's invasion began. It originally operated in the Kharkiv region, but has been repositioned to various locations over the course of the war so far, playing a role in the 2024 battles for Andriivka, for instance, and participating in Ukraine's 2024 Kursk offensive, helping to take over pieces of Russian territory, a feat that would have seemed utterly impossible earlier on in the conflict. However, making the impossible possible is just part of the job for the brave troops of the 225th. When the Kursk offensive ended, the unit moved back into Ukraine before going on to decisively reclaim control of Andrivka from the Russians. The 225th was even singled out for praise by Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in his daily address back in mid-June. There was a report by Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky on the front on our active actions. Special and very significant attention was paid to the Pokrovsky direction and our Sumy region, the border areas of our Sumy region. We're managing to knock out the Russian troops from there. I thank all our units for this, which really provide results. Following these days, our special gratitude goes to the soldiers of the 225th Separate Assault Regiment, precisely for the offensive operations in the border region of Sumy region and the liberation in particular of Andrivka. Thank you guys very much. Now, it's incredible to see how this brave unit has since gone on to regain even more valuable ground from the Russians, proving itself to be a major thorn in the Kremlin side. But these kinds of wins don't come easily. Ukraine, just like Russia, pays the price for every bit of ground gained or lost, as pointed out by military analyst Bohdan Miroshnikov, who also reported on the capture of Kindrativka on Telegram. In Sumy region, our soldiers liberated Kindrativka a few days ago, but the successes are not limited to that. There are even more local advancements. All this is very difficult and comes at a great price. Behind every liberated settlement, behind every liberated position, there is a whole story. A story of hard-earned success, sweat, blood and courage. Little by little, our soldiers are cutting off the flanks in the area of the enemy's main attack in the Sumy region. The occupiers did not completely capture Unakivka. It's hard to say how many weeks the enemy infantry has been fighting against the wall there. But don't forget the price of all of this, and how many fire teams in the form of special forces had to be deployed to stabilize the situation there and counterattack elsewhere. As Miroshnikov notes, Ukraine has to work hard for these victories, which is yet another reason why each one deserves special celebration, to honor the sacrifice and incredible, almost superhuman efforts of the soldiers involved. It's also encouraging to see reports of more local advancements, as this all suggests that Ukraine is doing exactly what it needs to do, holding the line, digging in, and refusing to give the Russians a single inch. On the face of it, retaking a single village might not seem like such a huge milestone, but it's far more important than it may initially appear, for several key reasons. First, it majorly disrupts the Kremlin's plans. Putin has clearly stated his intention to form a buffer zone in Sumy and elsewhere along the border, taking over countless Ukrainian border towns and villages in the process. He wants to extend Russia's territory as much as possible, expanding his own sphere of power and influence while reducing that of Ukraine. For that, he needs villages like Kindrativka. In fact, to truly build its buffer, Russia will need to take hundreds of villages like this one all along the border. It can't afford to have gigantic, costly back and forth battles for each and every one of them, sacrificing men, money and resources in the process. Don't forget, after all, that Russia has already suffered over 1 million casualties and lost colossal amounts of equipment over the course of the war. To have any chance of victory, it needs some easy wins. It has to be able to take ground swiftly and efficiently with minimal losses along the way. But Ukraine is making Russia's progress incredibly difficult. The Kremlin already had to dedicate a lot of manpower to capture Kindrativka in the first time round. Now, thanks to Ukraine, and especially the efforts of the 225th Division, Russia is right back to square one. It's also lost a lot of troops and supplies, and an even important senior officer, Major Andrey Yartsev of the 30th Motor Rifle Regiment, who was killed during Ukrainian forces' attacks on Andrivka. If it wants Kindrativka, it will have to yet again send in more and more troops in another desperate attempt to overwhelm Ukraine's strong defences. In short, it's a story of one step forward, 2 steps back for Russia. In addition, by recapturing Kindrativka, Ukraine is also in a way building a buffer zone of its own. It's pushing the Russians further away from the city of Sumy, making it much harder for them to target the area with drones and artillery strikes to establish dominance across the region. This all takes a toll on Russia's morale too. Indeed, in the wake of Ukraine's success, Russian military bloggers reportedly flew into a fit of frustration and rage. Some of them called the capture fake news, refusing to accept the reality of the situation. Others quickly claimed that Kindrativka wasn't that important anyway, despite previously calling it an invaluable strategic location. Some channels also tried to make out that Russian forces in the area had bravely and strategically retreated, when in actual fact they'd simply been wiped out by Ukraine's defenders. Then the blame game started. Multiple pro-Kremlin channels began to criticize local commanders and even the Ministry of Defense, while others posted memes mocking Russia's military strategy. It's never a good sign when even the most hardened of Russia's nationalists are openly criticizing the country's military, and it's likely that similar sentiments are spreading among the Russian ranks. If Russian troops keep seeing their comrades die or get injured in the most futile and foolish maneuvers, repeatedly outsmarted by the Ukrainians, they may start to rapidly lose confidence in their commanders. As morale plummets, so too will Russia's prospects of victory. At the same time, stories like this have the opposite effect over in Ukraine. They raise morale, inspiring both civilians and soldiers alike. Each victory is another symbol of Ukrainian resistance, of the country's incredible ability to never give up even when the odds are stacked up against it. Wins like this help to cement and support the idea that Ukraine can win this war, and that even if it suffers losses here and there, it always has the power to regroup and recover. The retaking of Kindrativka is another stunning example of Ukraine's tactical ingenuity and clever use of resources too. The country's armed forces have long understood that they're in a David versus Goliath kind of fight. They face a much larger army with far greater resources. Yet, the Ukrainians have repeatedly and consistently used the tools at their disposal to great effect, planning their attacks with the utmost care and precision, finding and striking at Russian vulnerabilities as and when they appear. They've engineered tactical advantages in Sumy and elsewhere along the front lines, using everything from drones and precision missile strikes on key logistical targets to perfectly planned pincer attacks to inflict heavy losses and complete chaos among the Russian ranks. They've dismantled Russian strongholds, disrupted the enemy's momentum and delayed its progress. And this has all come during what's supposed to be Russia's biggest and most powerful push of the war so far, its 2025 summer offensive. According to reports from Russian prisoners of war, this offensive was supposed to be the last big push, the final blow that would break Ukraine's resolve, destroy its morale, and open the path for Russia to march to victory. But that simply hasn't happened. Russia has made some gains in certain areas, and it's up the ante on its drone and missile strikes, bombarding Ukraine's towns and cities with record amounts of explosives. Yet its progress is still far slower than the Kremlin wants or expects. It's not rampaging across Ukraine, taking hundreds of square miles of land with ease. Instead, it continues to struggle, to toil, to face remarkable resistance and suffer heavy losses all along the front. So, rather than focusing purely on offensive maneuvers and taking as much Ukrainian terrain as it can, Russia now needs to go on the defensive in areas like the Sumy border, because if Ukraine was able to recapture Kindrativka, they may not stop there. They could push on, perhaps targeting the town of Kostiantinuka to the north of Kindrativka, or continuing their ongoing assault of Aleksivka to the east. The more they fight back and the more villages they recapture from the Russians, the stronger their position will become, and the harder it will be for Putin to ever achieve his aims. For now, only predictions can be made, while awaiting to see where and when Ukraine chooses to strike next. In the meantime, if you're eager to learn more about the conflict, take a look at one of our latest videos detailing how Ukraine's ever-improving aerial forces are rewriting the rules of modern warfare and carrying out devastating strikes deep in Russian territory. Or learn how Ukraine has ripped out Russia's jugular in a recent series of smart, calculated strikes on oil refineries and fuel storage facilities, hitting the Kremlin where it hurts the most. And finally, be sure to subscribe to our trusted news channel too for more daily updates direct from the front lines of Russia, Ukraine and other key conflicts from around the world.